We'll be together until 10 o'clock this evening, at which time we conclude with the clip that peaked. We're here to focus on what is arguably St. Lucia's most celebrated national event. We're not talking about Carnival, but we're talking about the just concluded Journée Creole. Everyone in St. Lucia, the people have just taken it on their own in a very innate manner to celebrate that cultural event. It has been with us since 1981, and every year there has been a build-up in terms of success, in terms of the turnout, and I will be giving an opportunity during the course of this evening's broadcast to have your say on this year's event, which was held last Sunday, a kind of postmortem on your part, an official postmortem, and I'm sure that the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center will engage in an official exercise during the course of this year. My guests this evening, the newly appointed Executive Director of the Monsignor Patrick Anthony FRC, Ms. Louise Victor, and her predecessor, Mr. Hilary LaForce. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, TMQ.
Ladies first, and I know you'll tell me that it was a success,
Right.
a resounding success. That's what we hear about Carnival. We hear the same thing about all kind of events in St. Lucia, jazz, and now Journée Creole. But what made it a success, Louise?
How are you so shy? I'm going to say it was a success.
Well, tell me it's not. It was not a success.
Well, like you said, Tim, Journée Creole is arguably the biggest cultural, I will not agree with you on event, celebration, cultural celebration in St. Lucia. And so the level of participation across all sectors, everyone from commercial,
you
private.
don't have to beg anyone, for
Exactly.
this. Yeah.
People look forward to that weekend, the food, the drink, everything that comes with it. So I think in terms of people celebrating and honoring what Journée Creole is, that success continues to be. If you are to look at the day itself, I think based on what, I always go back to how Paba explains what Journée Creole was supposed, the vision for Journée Creole when it was conceptualized back in the 80s was that one day it could be celebrated among all St. Lucians as if it was Christmas or even bigger than Christmas, but in their own unique way. And the fact that people are celebrating it in that way, it means it has achieved that. There are, of course, the host community elements of it that have shifted and changed in some ways, but
I think it's very competitive, selecting the various communities to host Journée Creole. Do you think it's a big thing?
Probably Mr. LaForce could speak more to that based on his experience, because when I came in, those things were already in motion. Right. So I can't speak to what that may have been like.
I know you were appointed in August of this year. Right.
So by then, the communities had already been chosen. So I can't really speak to what that may be. But I could imagine that, communities would look forward to hosting it because of the type of economic activity and economic stimulation and gains that anybody within that space could benefit from. So I think there
and
would
also
be
the pride, and I imagine the legitimacy.
Yes. And that sense of, okay, we did it best, that we're more authentic. So that rivalry somewhat exists. And which exists like many other things within the year. So I think that is probably there more or less to put a stamp that, Choiseul is the place to be, or Grosley is the place to be, because as I went around the island on Sunday, everywhere I stopped, persons from that area was saying, Choiseul is the best. You shouldn't leave Choiseul. When I got to Beauséjour, this is the best venue, and same thing in Vieux-Fort. So there is that sense of pride that naturally encourages that internal rivalry and persons wanting to do it better than anybody else. So even if they may have hosted before, but they want to do something different that may add a different flair. So I think that is there for sure.
What was your experience like serving as the executive director and experiencing Journée Creole for the first time in that capacity?
I enjoyed it more as a patron. I wasn't as tired. But being able to observe, compare, contrast, there was a time that I had to almost, stop myself from comparing or contrasting because each community is very unique and they will express their cultural pride in whatever way they please. So while there will be the natural comparisons, but I'm not sure that it's fair to say, this place was better, that place was better, because each community has something that's very unique to them. So I started the day in Choiseul. What was beautiful was the crafters, the women, weaving the baskets and whatnot right there, even if they already had products, but seeing them do that in action in the morning against the backdrop of Gopito, that was beautiful. Similarly, going to Vieux-Fort lends itself to an ease of traffic, both human and vehicular, that is just almost seamless. You're in, you're out. It was extremely hot, but even the setup, and there was also this exhibition of Bailota, but the way in which it was presented was not so far removed from the ways that you've seen it before. I thought it would have been at the school or whatnot, but it was right there, not too far from the stage, not too far from the vendors. So, that worked. There was also a photo backdrop element included. Normally for Journée Creole, you want to take your photos, but incorporated some, photo shoot aspect to it. So that was also unique. Similarly, getting to Beau Séjour, traffic management was also not an issue. There were some elements that I saw in Beau Séjour. For example, there was a gentleman from Moshi weaving baskets. So often we think that basket weaving is predominantly a Choiseul thing or certain areas, but to have known that this man came from a certain place in Moshi and this is what he does, seeing it on the promenade was also unique. But you also had quite a bit of crafters that Seydu brought in, and they were able to display their natural products. So I think each community lent itself to what was unique to them, and it's important to highlight.
Ms. Elfos, the contest in terms of selecting the various communities to host Journée Creole, I imagine that this would be a major headache for you in your time as executive director of the FRC.
Yes, it was before they began. The FRC chose places from the beginning. The very first place was Monrepo, chosen by the FRC.
Were you a member of the FRC in 1981 at the time?
1981, I was not a member yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. And they went to Font-Assor, and then to PI, and then to Bellevue and Choiseul. Okay, at that time they were choosing. But then after the Choiseul experience where there was this massive traffic jam, it was thought that there was need to have the activity in several different areas, at least in the north, south, east, and west. And there, so
during that era, it was hosted in one community.
In one community, and there, here it is felt that there was need to spread it around, because by that time, many persons were coming to this the celebration, and there were traffic jams and so on. And at that time, they were asking communities to put proposals for hosting. At the beginning, there were quite a lot of enthusiasm. But as time went, the kind of cost that's involved in hosting, it was relatively small, and there's a lot of couldn't attached to it. But as time went
during that period, about how much?
Well, during that period, one could say that it was almost free to host a Journée Creole. Nemo's issue of mascot event was not available at the time, was not on at the time. People did not pay for tents. People did build their own tents. There was nothing like put up a big stage for performances and so on. So there was no cost to this. But as time went on and there was need to get more entertainment, then the question of cost came into play. And some of these in those days, the government provided a small subvention for that purpose, which was not sufficient at all to run the operation. But communities as well as FRC solicited sponsorship from the major sponsors like by the time people like Flow, Digicel, Lucilec, and so on, and they assisted in that area. And in fact, I remember even those days, Lucilec would have sponsored by providing electricity free. Wasco did that, but today that's another story. Don't do that. Okay, so that went on for a long time until about last year, when we thought that we should have a new concept. Of course, by then, FRC's objective was met. The fact that you wanted most people to celebrate the occasion. Everybody embraced it, they could say. Okay. But then, FRC, the pioneer of this particular activity or celebration, never gained financially from it. And we thought the time had come, and more so, with the advent of the destruction of our building, that there's a need to raise funds to start rebuilding the FRC's building. And so last year, we had this new concept of having one place what we call the Grand Fête. It was held in before, and the FRC was responsible for all aspects of the activity. Whilst it was done by communities before, but this time FRC was responsible. And of course, the financing came from government through the events company. But then throughout the month, Creole Heritage Month, there are other activities. For example, there were things like the Lawen Creole, the schools festival. There was also an event planned for Patience, where the opportunity would be used to declare open the Session Descat Museum. Of course, unfortunately, rain fell and washed out that completely. There was Ulila Bar and so on. All of these activities being run by FRC principally, whereas in the past it was done by other organizations. And there was that theme which was maintained from last year to this year: discover St. Lucia, discover yourself, découvrir St. Lucie, découvrir Cau. And we were encouraging persons to go around the country, visit those places like Soufrière, where they have all these heritage sites, so you know about St. Lucia and so on. And of course, it will be a different situation, but getting people to know about the country and understand the culture. And hence the reason why this year there was this Beauséjour aspect of it. And the other thing that is important we need to talk about is, over the years, many more people have been coming to these activities. Many people are coming to celebrate. The areas where, in the small communities where people are saying that it's a better place out there, cannot hold the kind of crowds. Vehicles, there's a question of parking. Then you have to follow the mass crowd events protocol established by NEMO. The question of traffic management, the question of fire service, doctors, nurses, echo licenses,
public
liability insurance, and garbage disposal. It's a whole set of stuff. And even more important, the aspect of the vendors producing wholesome food, ensuring that it's if they're selling warm, hot foods, had to be hot all the time, and cold foods cold all the time. So all these things come into play right now, and it cannot be just people doing things as they wish. And we had this story about, well, why don't the FRC open this up and let everybody do their own thing? If that is done, it will be a nightmare. All right? Notwithstanding.
But isn't it happening?
It is happening, as what saying so. Yeah. Notwithstanding, there are communities doing their own thing all over the place. There is gap. There is this area getting bigger and bigger. In Dennery, it's getting bigger and bigger. Fond Lac-Tissab is getting bigger and bigger. So the people are doing the thing here and there, but guess what? They are not adhering to the protocol. It's just a matter of time before something happens, and then one would say, but why these people are doing this thing without adhering to the protocol? Okay.
How do you ensure that people adhere to the various protocols, Louise? Do you have to police the entire event? Because in the final analysis, people tell you that it was an FRC event, irrespective of whether it was or not.
Well, that's the thing, like Mr. LaForce is saying. While everyone is celebrating the fact that you have endorsed certain communities, then you have better control and you're better able to monitor what's happening there. Because FRC more or less absorbs the responsibility of all of those factors, public liability, echo, and all of these things. So that checklist is taken care of. But there are certain areas, even in my drive around, that because of how much it's growing, I could foresee, and even from an environmental health, an environmental health focus, there is, because of the type of cuisine that comes with Journée Creole.
In particular, the bouillon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is training that environmental health department does specifically for vendors during that time. So even in that regard, you're better able to monitor, because one bowl of lobster not being cooked properly, then that's catastrophe for an entire community, possibly. So all of these things become even more so important. And even some things that we traditionally, it's part of what we serve for Journée Creole. Fisheries and Department of Agriculture have written to us and say, hey, crayfish should not be served. You can be, anybody caught with crayfish will be fined $5,000. Manikou is under the wildlife protection. So all of these things that we figure, hey, we could continue eating, that's not the case. And some of these things, again, is because some of our approaches to harvesting some of these things have changed. Like crayfish, for example, before you used to have what's it called again, Mr. LaForce? The bamboo.
Oh yes, yeah. You mean the traps?
Right.
Yes,
You used to have a trap, so somebody used to push their hand, but now people just drop poison in the water, and then that's marine life being affected and whatnot. So there are all of these elements of training.
Is that putting a strain on your limited resources as an organization, in terms of policing the various aspects of the event to ensure that across the board it is a success? Because that's the thing about success. The more successful you are as a person or an event, the more vulnerable you are. You certainly have to meet many more stringent conditions and measures.
Exactly, yeah. And we also observed that some of the people are not really adhering to the protocols, and one could see that those responsible turn a blind eye to it, particularly in the area of vending of food. We could see that persons are supposed to cover their hair, no earrings, use gloves, but they're not doing this. And the environmental health department could still come and say, okay, I'm sorry, you can't continue. But they're not doing this because they realize, okay, people need to gain some benefit out of this, and they turn a blind eye to it. But the question is, how long can that continue? Yeah.
Can you imagine the fallout out of this? If, for example, food poisoning becomes an issue where so many people would become ill as a result of that?
It could be, which is why when the department suggested the training specifically for the vendors, we welcomed it, because internally we do not have the capacity to execute that type of training. So the partnerships are also very important. So while you recognize your constraints internally, you have to find creative ways of addressing it for external parties.
So you're coming in, new ideas. Come next year, what are the changes that you, as director of the FRC, you would want to implement, some of the measures you would want to implement? Have you given it any thought?
I have, but even the postmortem is going to be one that's very holistic, inclusive of all stakeholders. But to address the concerns of, this is what should be happening, and persons' opinions of, it's not authentic enough, probably more advanced training, because while we did have the training for the vendors, for example, it could have been done a few weeks in advance, because maybe some vendors may have already invested in, getting their crayfish and their manikou and whatnot, as was the case in one or two. So training for all parties involved ahead of time, even the preparation of the menus in Creole. According to the Journée Creole Charter, there is supposed to be that type of training that happens with everyone within the host communities. So, from vendors to, community leaders and whatnot. So these things have somewhat been lost. I wouldn't say lost, but it hasn't happened as it should according to the Jeune Creole Charter. So I'm hoping that we could go back to some of those elements to ensure that the authenticity that persons speak of is maintained.
People are also talking about the availability of food within a specific period of time that the food ran out.
Yes, again, I suspect that people did not anticipate that amount of people, that although over the years it has been big, but as every year it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, while you're saying, oh, in Choiseul has a lot of people, in G4, when you get to Beauséjour, or many more people again, and so not enough vendors. This is the thing, not enough vendors. And if you need more vendors, then you need more space. And that is why you couldn't go to the small community again. You have to have enough space. People are complaining that why you go to Beauséjour, this is not a community area, but the community, people from communities were there. People from Babono, from Marisil, from Grand Riviere, and Moshi, they all came together and formed this. And we maintained the aspects of showing Creole technology. There was wood sawing. There were people doing baskets, as you mentioned before. There was
the traditional burial.
The traditional burial and so on. So all these were there to teach people, about our culture.
Mr. LaForce, how has Jeune Creole changed or progressed between 1981 and now? In 1981 or thereabout, do you think it was something that was seen as something for the uneducated, people were not so prominent and sophisticated and so on?
Okay. Of course, the Jeune Creole began with the declaration of October 20th as Creole, International Creole Day, the language. And the idea was to try to ensure that we celebrate the language. We began doing this with the very first year in 1983, when it was declared. We had this discussion on radio. But the very next year we thought, well, look, let us use the opportunity to showcase all of St. Lucia's culture around the language. And to that extent, we were ensuring that on that day, people only speak Creole, and if you didn't, you'll be charged just a small few $1 to ensure you speak the language. But it seems that this aspect of it is growing, and we want to get this back. So this is something which Louis can often come saying, look, let us begin to push this Creole aspect back into that celebration as a major area of celebration, the language, very key. Now, the language has gone very far. All right, it has gone very far. I recall some time ago one of your callers on one of your programs saying that we have to get this out of St. Lucia, not only St. Lucia. The language has moved on to St. Lucia through various platforms. For example, free music. St. Lucia is doing quite a lot well with the Denver segment. There's lots of work being done with people like Cassav and the people from Haiti, Copa. So Creole is right throughout the world. It's a language that's known. Okay. We could not take on what we have in terms of our food and bring it across to the rest of the world. I don't think that each country have their own method of their choosing, okay? So it has gone a long way. It definitely has gone a long way.
You're watching Newsmaker Live right here on DBS Television. We'll continue in just a moment. We'll be hearing from the general manager of one of the island's leading hotels, and he believes that definitely we can build on Jeune Creole so that it can be used as a tool, as an event to market the island. More in just a moment, and of course later, your calls. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. Once again, you're watching Newsmaker Live on the DBS Television. My guests this evening, they are both from the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center. the current executive director, Louis Victor, and the previous executive director, Hilary LaForce. We have a report we edit Monday evening during the DBS News World. In it, the general manager of Sandals Grand is saying that there's so much more that we can get from the hosting of Journée Creole.
Journée Creole patrons got
Right, we have some technical problems. We'll rectify it, and my producer has assured me that we should be able to play you that report a little bit later. But the gist of the report is that the general manager of the Sandals Grand, what Mr. Anderson is saying is that definitely we can use this to ensure that we sell the island. What say you to this? Is this something that we can do?
I think it's something that we can do. But before we do that, I think we need to take stock of what the situation is now. We need to see what are the arrivals already like when it comes to Journée Creole weekend. And that's just based on an experience I had in trying to get some accommodation in the north for the weekend. And it was near impossible. Most rooms were gone. But who does that type of analysis and then who presents those? So I think we need to do that internally before we even go further. But I think we also need to be careful because while we already have a calendar of events that for the year, from jazz coming right down to Journée Creole, and everything is already targeting those external parties. Journée Creole is that thing it belongs to St. Lucians. And my concern or fear is that when it becomes about the visitor experience vis-a-vis the local experience, do we now have to reproduce, do we have to sanitize, do we bastardize what we currently have in order to accommodate? And just to go a little off track, during my research, one question that came up to me is that currently, most times you hear someone describes the St. Lucian, they're very hospitable and accommodating. And it makes me wonder, is it because of the presence and prevalence of the hospitality industry? Vis-a-vis when agriculture was our primary industry, how was St. Lucian described? Were we industrious? Were we hardworking? And so we have to be careful that branding ourselves too much as a destination does not become the only thing that we think that we are or we have to offer, but that we could respect, have a certain type of reverence for what is ours before just telling the world to come see what we have, but then packaging it in such a way that we think is presentable to them.
I'm sure that Mr. LaForce will have a say on this in just a moment, but I think the report, we can play it now. Let's listen to the report.
Journée Creole patrons got to see firsthand the outfits, traditional cuisine and paraphernalia related to yesteryear. This is in addition to witnessing the baking of bread in the steel drum oven and the traditional wooden truck, which drew the attention of many children as well as visitors. The common horseback riding and folk bands were also spectacular. However, one man says he observed that through more extensive marketing, the event can be even more productive.
What I'm seeing today is the true St. Lucia culture coming. I'm seeing it in the dress, I'm seeing it in the entertainment, I'm seeing the happiness in the people. The one comment I made, I think I see tremendous opportunities for it to become a national cultural experience. And in fact, being in the tourism industry, a tourism opportunity. I think with proper marketing, this could become another tourism attraction. I lament the fact that as I walk around, I just took a couple of our guests from the resort who I just happened to tell about it and they were interested. But I think we lost the opportunity to truly market it in the hotel and make it a truly destination. In fact, all these vendors here today with some delicious food lost out on an opportunity to make more. And I'd love to see that build on for next year.
Mr. Anderson says he hopes that this initiative is taken seriously and with haste, as he foresees the Creole Festival recording even more growth. In the meantime, St. Lucians in Brooklyn, New York celebrated the Creole Day as well as enjoyed the festival on a smaller scale, but managed to put out creative displays highlighting the island's fruits and ground provisions. For the DBS News World, I am Alex Bousquet.
Alex, for this report, it was filed on Monday evening during the DBS News World. Mr. Hilary LaForce.
Okay. There's also obviously a need for us to diversify our economy. Over the years, we have been the purely agrarian society where the most of our income came from many years ago, from sugarcane, then bananas and cocoa and so on. And it has moved away slightly into the service and tourism industry areas. And so whatever can be done to be able to attract visitors to our shores, which basically provides us with the kind of income for our development, is welcomed. But at the same time, we would want not to, as Louis said, to bastardize our celebration. Already, we are having lots of persons who speak the Creole language, who understand the Creole from Martinique, Guadeloupe, and so on, come into our country. Maybe there's need for more, because as we say, this is low-hanging fruit. But if we can get many more people to come, where our people can benefit, the country can benefit, I think we can welcome this.
I don't think we should worry too much about the Creole, Junior Creole losing its authenticity and its natural appeal, primarily because Carnival in Trinidad and Tobago, it is very attractive primarily because of its uniqueness. Mm-hmm. The steel band music and everything else that's happening in Trinidad and Tobago, Brazil Carnival and so on. I don't think that the Brazilian Trinidadian would want to change Carnival just to please people, tourists and so on, people from the other islands and the other countries, and likewise us. If we change anything about Junior Creole, then I don't think it will be attractive, because that is why the people will be gravitating towards it in the first place, something that's different and something that's unique.
Right.
But I think the cultural pride of these countries are very different to our situation in St. Lucia. Mm-hmm. So that's something that you would also have to consider. Trinidadians are a special kind of people when it comes to, their cultural pride. Do we have that same type of cultural pride in St. Lucia? Very often we have seen how easily we prostitute ourselves as a country. So I think there is the risk if we are to purely market it as something for visitors.
But I don't think it's for visitors, but we are enjoying it, but you're inviting people to our shores. But do you think it's something that can work? It's something that we should look at, Mr. LaForce?
I think so. I think it's something we can look at. There's no reason why we could start doing some more marketing of it, and encourage more persons. As Louis said, somebody came from the Seychelles, so it means that there's some word going out there that St. Lucia has a good thing to offer.
What about the other?
Tim, I think it's the marketing also has to be very targeted. So should we not be targeting to places specifically like Louisiana that has that type of French background, the South Pacific and other Creole countries around the region. So I don't think it's about mass advertising and inviting any and everyone. But probably if we could attract persons who have that type of appreciation and want to experience something similar yet different to what they have, then there will be that better respect for it.
What about the observance of Creole Heritage Month? Do you think enough is being done by way of the various lectures and the various activities that we have during the course of the month? Does the month really stand out?
I think there's need for some more. There's definitely need for some more. Encourage communities to get involved, have programs where we can look at, and provides advice here and there. I think there's definitely need for some more. There is things happening. In fact, around that same time, you have the usual weekend of what they call solo, happening almost every weekend. It's part of Creole Heritage Month. Then we have the La Marguerite Festival during that time, but there is still need to have some more in that area.
Let's look at the language in terms of the respect that's given into it, the recognition, because all part of the observance. And definitely, I think that we are still divided as to how much respect we should give to Creole and maybe what role it should play in terms of our development, in terms of our communication and so on, English being our official language. What say you to Creole and the recognition it's getting in St. Lucia?
Well, Tim, I wish you were at the Creole conference on Monday. It was quite an interesting discussion from Dame Paulette Louise's keynote address in terms of contextualizing the language development from early settlers up until now and looking at it decade by decade. It's sad how much has been done, how much scholarly work has been done on the language and where we are today. It's sad that our language policy is still in draft and being reviewed. But at least for me coming in, it is one of the things that I hope to advocate on quite passionately in ensuring that the language gets that type of respect, because it is a reality that for students, there are teachers in certain communities that will tell you they have to teach some of the students in Creole in order for them to even introduce a subject or a concept in English. So I think, the evidence is there. It is probably just a matter of will and political power to do what has to be done to give the language that we tend to only celebrate during October and say that, it's such a beautiful language and it's such a beautiful culture in terms of the Creole culture, and then after October we forget about it. So I think it's about continued advocacy, not just by FRC, but from other departments, other stakeholders.
Mr. LaForce?
Okay, we've come a long way, let's put it this way. There's still that stigma about the language, in that it is spoken by persons who are illiterate, people who don't go to school. And as such, there are people who try not to let the children speak the language under the guise that it will affect their learning, and it would affect their English. As a matter of fact, it's also the other way around. English affects the Creole, because some people put in a lot of English into the Creole. But as I said, it's come a long way, to the extent that right now we have Creole on radio. One of the most popular programs in St. Lucia is the Creole program, and it's also on television. Throughout the Creole-speaking world, though, it's a different situation, where through continuous promotion, countries like Haiti, as a matter of fact, of 10 million people who speak Creole purely, that's their first language. Their music has gone throughout the world. We know of a group that's, every time they come to St. Lucia, all they sing is in Creole, and it's the most popular group in St. Lucia, and that is Casa. Okay, and not only St. Lucia, wherever they go, very popular. In fact, also recently, Marshall Montero took one of the Casa numbers and make a big thing out of it. Yeah. So the language is doing lots of making progress throughout internationally. St. Lucia, there is need for continuous promotion. Some people who have been in it will say, boy, look, man, I'm tired. I've been advocating. I've been quarreling, and yet the powers that be are not taking it up as a serious issue.
Will it be taught in school? I think I heard something about to that effect. Creole being taught in school.
No, what Dominica has launched that. So, in order for it to be taught in school, your policy would be able to lead that. So, unless we have...
Is that something you'd want to see happen?
Definitely.
Okay. Do you think it will be a tough sell? It would be difficult to get the authorities to do that? To teach Creole in schools?
I think the conference on Monday gave some hope in terms of where they are in terms of the draft. Right. That there has been some movement in it. So that gave some of us who were present, some hope that there may be an introduction, not just in the school system, but a general acceptance of the language and the language use in our wider society. So keeping our fingers crossed on that. And
But do you think we are being hypocrites that whenever it's Journée Creole, we speak the language, we revel in it, we enjoy it and so on, we have exchanges, the banter does take place, but to give it that kind of national acceptance and prominence, I don't think that we're doing it.
Okay. As we heard at the conference, and people from persons who work at CAMDU, they're working on the policy, but at the same time, they're not saying to the teachers you should not teach Creole. So teachers, take upon themselves in certain areas to teach the Creole language. In fact, there's a gentleman called Mr. Michael Walker who was to teach the language. So it's a foreigner who came to teach the language in schools on television. All right, but we also getting the language accepted by our young people through mediums like the Denver segment. The most popular, 90% of the songs are in Creole. And right now, they're making waves internationally. There's one of the young gentlemen I understand is in France, doing very, very well. So here we have this avenue where we can use to push the language even further in our country.
At the level of the media, how much you think is being done? Do you think sufficient is being done in terms of promoting the language and utilizing it on radio and television?
Okay, a lot has been done, but there can be some more. I know, as I said earlier, one of the most popular programs is done in Creole. Everybody gravitated to it. We have a few Creole people who have been on radio for a long, long time, and they continue to do what they're supposed to be doing. There is also need for some more stations, more programs in Creole, not only the news, but more programs in the Creole language.
Now, there's been one criticism. People have been saying that, for example, when officials are communicating to the public on critical matters, there have been health scares and matters dealing with the budget, and they make reference to gross domestic product and economic growth and so on. You do not have somebody speaking in Creole to communicate to people who can only speak in that language. Do you see there's something that should be addressed, Louise?
it has to be. And I was hoping in my earlier years that many other persons within the walls of the House of Parliament would have taken a page from Dame Paulette's book in terms of how she introduced the language within that setting. So again, I think it really goes back to policy as well as willpower. Some may argue that speaking in the Queen's English or Standard English might be a way of keeping the masses less informed. So, which is why it kind of goes back to political and willpower of those that actually have to take the action.
So are we hypocrites? Are we being hypocritical about the whole issue, Mr. LaForce? When we enjoy the language, when we say when we travel, we use it a lot. We use it at various events, Journée Creole in particular. But then we do not kind of want to give it the kind of respect that it deserves. For example, the Jamaican language unit at UWI has submitted a petition to have Jamaican recognized as an official language.
Exactly. Yeah.
And 15,000 names are required to elicit a statement from the government on the matter. Should we seek to do
The very same thing.
the same thing
Yes.
for
I think so.
Creole?
I think so. And as you rightly said, there's some degree of hypocrisy, whereas some people, are saying, okay, it's something, it's part of our language, but there's still the stigma. There's still this fear, if we speak this, once I go to speak Creole, somebody say, okay, you're not.
Can the language disappear as a result?
It can, if we don't continue to push for it, it's first of all for it to be recognized as another official language in St. Lucia. It can, as happened in Trinidad and Grenada. There used to be Creole in Trinidad and Grenada. It's completely disappeared right now. And we have to continue promoting, advocating for its continuous acceptance and ensuring that the government has a policy to ensure that this is not only in schools but throughout the entire community.
What about Creole interpreters? When, for example, especially Ministry of Health officials and so on are communicating with members of the public on critical health-related matters, let's say the threat of Ebola, let's say the outbreak of some kind of disease where you have to communicate to the wider St. Lucian public. Should Creole be utilized as well?
Very good. In fact, that came up at the Creole conference, the question of, in fact, there were special little booklets with terms for people going to visit the doctor, people who can't explain, their problems or their medical condition in the English language, and what is it, that they say to the doctor, who most of them are English and don't understand Creole, and that is another very critical area.
The weather
report, and so on. Yes, these are the kind of things that we need to ensure that we can train persons to translate, and as well provide little booklets that people can use to read. Okay, and guess what? The orthography is there. It is fairly easy. I remember there was a teacher saying, "Look, I'll pass on the orthography to some literate people who read English properly, and they'll read it. They may not understand what they read, but they read it. It's so easy. It's a question of ensuring that they take on the challenge to learn it."
When we come back, we'll continue to focus on Jeune Creole and in particularly its economic impact. Stay with us. You are watching Newsmaker Live on DBS Television. We are also on Facebook.
Good as well.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. We continue our discussion here. Let's put the telephone number on the screen so that you can call with your questions and comments for my guests. Once again, Louise Victor. She's the Executive Director of the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center. And she was preceded by Mr. Hilary LaForce. Mr. Hilary LaForce is the former Executive Director of the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center. We have a call in line already. As we say, good evening to you. This is Newsmaker Live. You're on the air. Hello. Hi, good evening to you, caller.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I went to Journée Creole, I went to Choiseul, and I went to Villefort. And I actually felt like a lost sheep, because I had no idea what was happening where, what time. So what I would like to suggest is maybe a program of events at the different areas, the venues, and the time.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to your comment on that.
Okay, thank you so much. Care to respond to this?
That's a very good point. Each community would have a running order of their day from the morning right into the evening. So that's something we could definitely take into account for next year.
We have a call? Yeah. Good evening, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Tim, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, sir.
I've been looking forward to a program like this for a little while now. Tim, I want to start by reading something I wrote on Facebook about 3 to 4 years ago. Basically, as my preamble to the contribution I want to make.
Yeah.
A celebration of our cultural heritage, our St. Lucianness, our national pride, our creativity, and yes, our togetherness. Journée Creole is indeed here. No other event transcends color, creed, class, gender, age, politics, religion more than Journée Creole does. This event, without a significant government subvention, has truly taken up a life of its own. It is now celebrated by St. Lucians in every nook and cranny of this world with consummate St. Lucian pride and food. Oh, what a time. I love it. However, we must do more, and here is a thought. Why don't we take this opportunity to declare the Monday after the National Heroes Day, the Monday after the day, as National Heroes Day. Make it a holiday to celebrate our Sefen, Ramopolians, and other cultural or other heroes of our sweet St. Lucia. Yeah, I could hear some of you shouting. Another holiday? Fair enough. But here is what can be considered. Remove the Anglican Thanksgiving holiday that is celebrated on the first Monday of the month and has lost its significance, and declare the day as suggested. Now, Tim, are you there?
Very much so. I'm listening. You have our undivided attention, sir.
Yeah. Very good. Now, Tim, I want to take it, and I heard Louis Victor, and I have to tell you, Tim, I'm very impressed with that young lady. I mean, too often, for long enough, we have seen, and I'm not taking anything away from the Booth Samuels and Trish Alford and so on, but it's a breath of fresh air when you see a young person championing the cause of championing our cultural heritage. And, she's so involved. And I heard her comment on the whole holiday thing, and she made sense in the sense that, look, we must have some sort of purpose connected to it. Why another holiday? And that's why I decided to recall what I just wrote. But back to the whole thing about Journée Creole, right? I mean, you hear everybody say, but, it's just a blocko. Sir, it's a cultural blocko. That's what it is, right? I mean, the point is that, look, people say, well, you do get, I heard somebody describe Beauséjour as, what they call it, a concrete Journée Creole, etc. You do see the palms, etc. We have to understand that culture is not static. Culture evolves. You will not see palms and bamboo, etc., the forest and people cutting bamboo, etc., because people in those days did not have tents, right? There are tents available, etc., which is cost-effective. People don't have to spend so much money to have people going to cut the forest, cut trees, cut bamboo, etc., to put tents, etc. So the thing has changed. What I would like to see happen, we don't have to get the thing so regimental, Tim. What the Folk Research Center does have a role to play. What I would like to see happen is that the Folk Research Center, whatever subvention government is giving them, focus on an event. Where are you going to put that VG? And so that you could protect the cultural thing. You're not going to get anybody that would be able to cut logs. I hear people say, I ain't see nobody cutting logs. Who is cutting logs these days? They have chainsaws, etc. The people that used to do that and are able to do that, they are dying. They have died and they're dying. You understand? So that's what we have to understand. Then there's no question of, the food is too expensive. Oh, come on. Christmas is commercial. Everything is commercial. You have to understand the realities and so on. And there's another question about the dress. And I want Mr. Lafos to educate people about, what is our cultural heritage? Our cultural heritage just transcends just what is. It is African, it is European, it is everything. You will say, what is Madras? Where Madras came from? Look at the African way. They have Ghanaian African. There's a lot of Madras origins from India. So, Junior Creole and what you do about Junior Creole is a celebration, as I said, of your cultural heritage. What we used to do, what we protect, what is ours. And I noted what the guy from
Mr. Anderson
from Sandal said. That is an event. We don't put maybe just a small percentage into that event. We don't market it at all. And that is ours. That is the only thing that we could claim as ours. And a lot of St. Lucians right now in the diaspora are coming down for Junior Creole. They are not coming for Christmas. They are not coming for Carnival. I was there for a few St. Lucians yesterday. They're going back tomorrow. They came down for Junior Creole. That is something that we could identify. It is different. It has taken a life of its own, And sometimes I just believe, just let it be. You don't have to make it so regimental and put laws and so on and so on. Yes, of course, I believe the responsibility to protect the event, to protect the integrity of the event, to make sure that it maintains its Creoleness, if you like it, is that the folk research center, and maybe they could focus on an event of their own to make that happen, and let the communities do what they ever please. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Response from you?
Yes, in fact, I could agree more than what you're saying, particularly as it relates to the issue of saying, let us go and cut the forest and put bamboo and put tents and so on. The fisheries division is discouraging people from cutting the gomye. They have to do fiberglass and so on. So why, in fact, as you already says, cultural dynamic, we couldn't be doing the same thing. As I said to some people, if you want to maintain what happened in the past, when your parents die, don't use the undertaker anymore. Use the old days of putting the coffin in your head to go and bury the person. All right, things are changing. We cannot continue going back in the same old thing. We can demonstrate, one of those thatch houses and so on during on day as part of the crew technology, showing exactly what used to happen in the past. And let me say something also. Junior Creole is not purely about what happened in the past, It's our culture generally, it's what's happening today also. It's not purely what happened in the past. We can then show people where we came from and where we have gone and where we are going. It's important to know what we are doing and how we're going, because culture changes all the time. So it doesn't have to be, you must have this old thatch house, must have bamboo built out there, the whole thing is in a mess. We can use these tents, decorate them nicely and make it look attractive.
What's the Louise? Particularly with the suggestion that he made that the FRC can host its own activity, so that anything that is watered down in the various communities and so on, you could do the exact opposite of that.
And I think based on what Mr. LaForce said last year in terms of restructuring the event, it was somewhat of that approach, because we would have taken into account that everyone is celebrating. However, this is the Guafet, and this is where you could come and see it or experience Junior Creole from an FRC perspective. I think Mr. LaForce would also speak a bit to his preamble about the holiday, considering he's written about it.
Yes. In fact, that's another one too. Yes, I was saying 4th of December, but I agree with you, and Tim said earlier too, that we can use this
Thanksgiving
holiday, which is of no state rates anymore, and have it as part of that Junior Creole. In fact, about not 2 years, almost 4 years
ago. The very small Anglican community in St. Lucia will take offense.
Well, we take offense.
You're saying it's not significant anymore. Good evening. We have a call. Hold on. Newsmakerlive, you're on the air.
Yeah, good night.
Good night to you, ma'am.
I agree with the caller a while ago on what he said. And what I would like to really want to happen is to really see the patois is taught in schools, because it is not only a culture to us; it is our history. We know where we got it from, and it should continue in our culture. It should continue in our country, because we know between the French and the British, we know it is our history. That when they was fighting 14 times for the Helen of the West, and we know it's because of French, the French people learning that the mixed French and we start speaking the patois. So I think that is very important, and I have heard that over and over for years upon years. From the time I was a child, they should introduce the language to the schools, and it's not happening. It's not happening. It is slow coming, too slow coming, because as the gentleman expressed his thoughts, instead of having Thanksgiving Day or holiday, we should have a holiday for Creole Day. We should have a holiday for Creole Day. We should be, instead of we having how many months of celebration, foreign celebration, we should have a holiday for our celebration. And I agree with what Mr. Laffour said. Things are changing, but we have to keep the culture alive, to teach our children. We're supposed to have pictures, like when the days come in, to put pictures up to, the radio stations, the television station should be showing more of those things, that was there before. Because I remember for myself, when I raised at my mother's home, my mother could not speak not one word of English. And it's when I went to school, and I was speaking patois all the time, and it's when I went to school, I started learning English. I started learning to speak English. And my mother used to send me to people to teach me how to pray in English, because it's French. It's French. My mother had know how to the patois prayers like French. She had know how to pray. So all those things are too slow coming in St. Lucia, and we're thinking that it's not important. And as we're thinking that, the older ones thinking it's not important, the younger ones is not taking interest in it, and all our culture is just going down the drain. Our history is going down the drain. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I realize that you avoided this particular issue, whether the following day should be a holiday, Louise, after Journée
Well,
Creole.
I think because in speaking with Alex on the day of the conference, I would have kind of addressed it during that interview that, there's so many things in terms of the Dominica's celebration that people are saying, oh, we should do this, we should do that. We need a holiday, but my question is always why? What is the significance of it? The way the gentleman has proposed it, I think, is brilliant, because that was also an element of Journée Creole that used to be very prominent in honoring your Creole heroes within the communities. Not sure that it happens like it used to, but it is an opportunity for us to celebrate. Maybe even Icon Series could
Right.
coincide with that holiday. So I welcome the idea and the way that he's proposed it.
We continue to take your calls once again on the broadcast Newsmaker Live with me, Timothy Poli, and my guests. And they are both from the Monsignor Patrick Anthony FRC. Louise Victor, she's the executive director, and the former executive director is Mr. Hilary LaForce. Let's look at the, if we can, the economic impact of Journée Creole, Mr. LaForce.
Okay. In the absence of empirical evidence or data.
Now, isn't it a shame that we have to start along those lines? Okay?
Yes, because we
After
have
so long.
It's quite right. After so long, we have been saying that there's need to get information to have as a support to indicate that this has definitely have economic benefits to the country. All right, and I have said so again with not any information, but I believe that the biggest beneficiary is the government of St. Lucia by virtue of VAT. They obtain VAT on almost every item that is being sold, for Journée Creole, especially on liquor and other drinks. And of course, we know that the vendors, they look forward to it. Many of our vendors look forward, and as we know, they were sold out in some places. I understand in the Chazelle, for example, sold out long before it was even midday in some instances. And everywhere you went to, while people are talking about price gouging is very, very high prices, but yet people are coming out there to sample those foods. Some of them have eaten for a long, long time. Okay, And so it's a benefit. Then we have lots of Martinicans coming here. As to how many that comes here, I don't know. But Louis said earlier on that in trying to get space to house some of the FRC staff, they had problems getting space. Just 2 rooms at the hotels up north. So it means that people are coming. We heard that there was somebody from the Seychelles where they speak the Creole too. That's a long way from here. And they came. So it means that there are definitely economic benefits, and we can seek to get more out of it.
Now, if the government is benefiting from Journée Creole, the hosting of the event, and Creole Heritage Month in particular, why you think that more is not being done in terms of financial support to the FRC to host that event?
Well, probably they haven't understood, that the amount that they can obtain from it is almost like a boomerang. You provide it, you get it back.
You have a call. Good evening to you, Newsmaker Live, you're on the air.
Name?
Hello, good evening to you, caller.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, ma'am.
Good evening, and to your guest.
Good evening. Yeah.
I am calling in my capacity. Let me see. In a former life, I was in a ministry which was responsible for coordinating, together with the FRC, the Journée Creole celebrations. Now, the celebration is evolving. So what was presented X many years ago when it was first launched, now in 2019 has changed. And I am still trying to grapple with what ought to be presented now with respect to Journée Creole. I attended the celebration at Beauséjour. And if, as we say, culture is a way of life, or our way of life, Mr. LaForce, you indicated that what we showcase now ought not to be basically what obtained yesteryear, but what obtains now as well. And whilst at Beauséjour, I noted there was a dire need for waste collection and garbage disposal. There were cups and plates with food strewn all over the place. That is our way of life as well, our culture. I noted that some of the vendors had small garbage bags tied to their booths. That is not sufficient, okay? By the time I got there, which was about 2:30, there was almost no food. And even at those booths where there was something left, I wish to recommend that the vendors, some of them did, that the vendors present a list to the patrons where we can see what you have and the price. So if I want my bouillon quab and you don't have it, I can move on to Cubicle XYZ, wherever I could get it. I want to share something with you as well. I noted that a vendor was serving food. It was very hot that day and she was sweating. And she used the back of her hand to wipe the sweat off her forehead and continued serving food. I want to ask the question, are the vendors trained in food handling? Just a question, because I know it is done with respect to other activities. Perhaps this is something you would want to look at. When I got to a certain booth, I asked for I was looking for my bouillon quab. And this vendor told me, yes, she had. It was $12 for the bowl. So I purchased the bowl. But she told me it was $12. And I handed $20 to her assistant. And she said to her assistant, look, take $12. But she handed me $5, that's the assistant. So I said to her, but wait, weren't you told that it was $12? So I should have got $8. She said, oh, yes, And she opened her hand, and the $3 was in her hand, and she had not given it to me. So these are little things, that we have to really look at. When I got home and I looked at my bouillon crab, let me tell you something. There was the smallest, you know what you call the gandhi? That's what I call it. There was the smallest that I ever saw, and that was the only crab in the bowl, right? And this bouillon was the most tasteless that I ever tasted in my history of eating my bouillon crab, okay? But all in all, I must say, good so far, better can be done. And I think perhaps I could meet with Ms. Victor sometime because I have certain recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. Appreciate the contribution there. I will not identify her, but that's a former PS.
Okay, I think I know it is.
Yeah. Let's continue to take your calls as we focus on the just concluded Journée Creole celebrations in St. Lucia. It was last Sunday, officially hosted in the north at Beau Séjour, at the Promenade, and also in Vieux Fort. But Choiseul would not have this thing about not hosting it, not being able to host it, don't have the finances and so on. Why did the decision taken not to provide Choiseul with the finances to host the event, to be an official host?
We received a reduced budget of over 50% from what was obtained last year vis-a-vis what was planned, and the timing of that information would have impacted not just the host communities, but some of the other events that we had scheduled for the month. And so we had to revise our calendar and withdraw in light of all of what we discussed earlier, especially when it comes to mass crowd events. And there are certain costs, Tim, that I cannot even begin to, how easily they tabulate, and before you know it, you've exhausted your budget. And so it was purely a financial decision. We had been in contact with a group from Choiseul, and when we explained the situation, they were understanding, but the community came together. The district representative, the parliamentary representative, saw it fit that, the community still have it, and he was able to pull together the resources to make it happen for them.
Certainly bold of Choiseul to say that they certainly will not, take no for an answer and go ahead and organize their own event.
That is quite appreciative of what they did. Of course, it shows that when people come together, the extent to which they can mobilize the resources, and that is a very good thing. We're hoping that other communities, and as time goes on, we want to do something like this, follow the social experience. And even though the FRC doesn't have the kind of resources to allow several several communities to host, that they can on their own take it up, assuming, or not assuming, that hoping that they would follow the mass crowd events protocol. That's very important.
How soon are you hoping to have a postmortem, official postmortem?
We're hoping within the next week or two. Yeah.
How thorough and frank do you think that will be?
I think it will be very thorough. Because it wouldn't just be, it cannot be internally purely. So based on the enthusiasm of some of the other stakeholders, like the police, fire, etc. For me coming in, I'm looking forward to it because it would help inform so many decisions going into 2020 and how we approach Journée Creole going forward. But Tim, I also wanted to go back to just answer or address two of the concerns of the caller. To say that yes, there was training for vendors and food handlers by the Department of Environmental Health.
Department of Ministry of Health.
Yes.
The
Environmental Department in the Ministry of Health. Yes. And also when I got to Beau Séjour, I saw the quote-unquote disaster, not quote-unquote, the disaster in terms of waste management. Yeah. There was a waste management plan, and I guess it was just a matter of it not being enforced. Similarly, the officials from from environmental health are normally on the ground enforcing, but then at some point the crowd becomes so thick that can you really control or hoover everyone while you have 20 persons in front of you asking you for a bowl of water? So again, all of these things are things to put into perspective in the post-mortem and going forward.
Once again, you are watching Newsmaker Live, where we continue to take your calls. The telephone number is on screen, and my guests, they are from the Monsignor Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center. Louise Victor, who is the executive director, and the former executive director is Mr. Hilary LaForce. We're focusing on the just concluded Journée Creole festivities in St. Lucia, hosted on Sunday. Going forward, what are some of the changes you think that you'd want to implement so that it could be something that is sustainable and long-term successful? Louise?
Introducing programs that are more geared towards children and younger demographics. We did introduce Festa Joie on the 20th, and that was held in Mico, and it was Festival of Traditional Games. And it met its objective in terms of introducing children to games of yesteryear. Some of the children did not know how to, play simple things. I even learned in the process. I saw for the first time how they made a compo ball. The men were right there on side making the topi from scratch and showing the boys how to play. So I think these sorts of initiatives are important, not just for the month of October, but if it could be introduced slowly into the formal school system.
Good evening to you. This is Newsmaker Live. You're on the air.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, ma'am.
I would like to know why they play that game with Choiseul. I want to know.
Why did they play that game with Choiseul?
Yeah, because
what was the game?
They say it was Choiseul and Vieux-Fort. And then they changed it, they put it. It was Beauséjour and Choiseul. And after they said, they changed it and they put Vieux-Fort.
Okay.
Why do they do that? And at the last minute, then they talk about Choiseul.
Okay, the organizers will...
I knew
go ahead.
It would be a successful with Choiseul. Because Choiseul have a lot to offer. Yeah, a lot of things to offer.
And are you calling from Choiseul, ma'am?
Like Vieux-Fort is a town. And they shouldn't have Journée Creole in no town. And look, right now I heard they say they're going to hold on to Vieux-Fort.
And you calling?
Right.
And you calling from where?
I'm calling from Beauséjour.
Okay.
I'm from Choiseul.
Okay, all right.
I was in Choiseul on Sunday. What they said that would take part in Choiseul, I didn't see anything take part in Choiseul because of the way they treat Choiseul. Because first they say Choiseul and everybody was getting prepared for Choiseul because there's a lot they had to show. But then they change it and at the end they put it back. Right? I was in Choiseul. I was trying a chair, like the chair Jean they having in Choiseul. Right? My brother was supposed to come and show them the way they're doing the chairs. Because of that, he changed his mind. You understand? I don't like what they did to Choiseul at all. Choiseul was the best place to have that Journée Creole instead of Vieux-Fort, because they have it too often in Vieux-Fort, and Vieux-Fort is a town. You cannot put free stones in a town. You cannot burn woods in a town. You understand?
The organizers will have to apologize.
That's not going with me at all.
Okay.
I hope next year they do better.
Thank you so much for calling in.
Choiseul deserves it. Give it to Choiseul, not Vieux-Fort.
Okay, ma'am.
Vieux-Fort is a town.
Thank you so much for calling.
Good.
So, apologize, Louise.
Well, first of all, we didn't. What did she say? I can't
Didn't like
remember
how
we
you treated Chazelle.
But Tim, the necessary communication in terms of the persons we were engaging from Chazelle, that was done. I think that was a respectful way. The community reacted, and it was beautiful how they were able to put it on. I mean, like I said earlier, it was a matter of financial implications, and we recognize that Chazelle is going to put it on regardless.
So you will not apologize. You have nothing to apologize, right? We have a call. Good evening. Newsmaker Live, you on the air?
Bonsoir, Fouexe.
Yes, bonsoir. Ça qu'a fait?
Nous là.
Ça c'est pied boire à faire.
Yo la ka point li souf. Yo la ka point li souf.
All right.
Just a suggestion. I was thinking aloud, if thinking aloud is allowed, that something has to be done to be more somehow either pre or during the actual day of celebration to be a little more pedagogical in terms of teaching people certain basic skills. I think there need to be a place for that. We've lost things like knitting. We have lost a lot of traditional things we did here, even mending clothes, doing stitches. And I think there needs to be a place for that. Some, apart from just the eating and drinking and etc., which is important, of course. But certain, I noticed as when I grew up as a child, we don't even have tailors like we had before. And somehow we need to try and bring that back in the Junicle, hoping that young people would be fascinated by it and would seek to become themselves doers of these traditions, so it doesn't die with the holders of it or the trustees of it, as I would say. So just an idea that somehow we need to look deeper into the things that are disappearing that were very useful. They were practical. They were things that are even good for today, especially in case of a hurricane. We don't have electricity. We cannot use the electric machines, and we cannot do all of that. Some of these skills we need to excavate and find them and bring them into the mix of Journée Creole so that we could again get our young people in a kind of a wonderment so that they could begin to, be fascinated by these things and somehow get to be apprentice in this area, teach themselves or go to the masters and learn again so that them, because you not see anything fascinating, knitting stuff, or some good tailor in Journée Creole cutting a pants there and show us how we used to do it long ago, type or stitching or patching an old pants, ka pièce un vieux chilote bagay comme ça. Ou comme ça me cadia be ka faire cho meuble bébé bagay comme ça. C'est meuble longtemps, couche longtemps, de là ou ka ouais ça mais il ka disparaître trop vite. So, on nous vient mener ces bagages là, et fait une manière pour maman venir apprendre pendant une journée, moi héritage là qu'a courir. Merci un chay.
Merci.
Yeah.
Merci.
Yes,
la force Saudi pour ça.
Saudi a moi d'accord pour 100%. Et puis pas seulement en temps de Journée Creole parce que nous pas assez temps, on va pas assez temps pour faire ça. Mais nous, qu'on programme Place Recherche Folklore, nous sani entraînement, bagay comme ça, pour faire bon apprendre coude. Par exemple, nous t'es pour ni en festival Madras, parce qu'en chaque monde quoi Madras sorti en pays aide seulement, mais à pays gens Afrique qui sabi Madras, c'est Scottish là qui sabi Madras. Toute qualité différentes patterns qu'on a dit. Et nous te voulu faire.
Nous avons un dernier call.
Oui.
Final call, good evening, you on the air?
Oui, bonjour, monsieur.
Oui, bonsoir.
Bon, c'est bagay longtemps ça, zot ka pale abord là. Yo, c'est bon. Mais nous tous nous pour ça, nous en dans différents temps à présent. Si personne ne veut ces bagages longtemps ça, seulement nous ça, ouais, monsieur Lafort, ex-jeune mademoiselle là, on est là, c'est en l'air portrait. Vous comprenez ça là? Au passage, jamais mené ces bagages ça là, vie encore, parce que yo a passé, tant ces bagages ça là, a passé. Oui, nous voulons vivre, nous voulons changer ces bagages là. Mais tant yo a fini nettement, au passage, jamais ouais un jeune créole qu'on était avant, comment était connaître lui à Belleville, Fort et Belmont Repos. Au passage, même ça encore, tant ça a passé. So, moi, quand on a chay, mon ka crier programme, yo gade, menen disvier, menen savier, seulement non ça menen savier. Et souni, pour tuer ces bagages là, il y a une exhibition. Dans l'école, et dans le hall, côté dans le centre commune, comme on a venu, et puis on a gardé ces portraits. Ça, c'est seulement ça fait ça. Mais, pas Nathan mon a dit, l'antenne, j'en pour le fruit, j'en pour le rôti, KFC, ou pas ça, en fait, c'est bagage ça la fait. En temps moderne, ça nous a dit. Je me voulais faire les sciences savent. Je n'ai créole, j'ai changé et qui a continuellement changé. Par exemple, ça m'a ouais, c'est qualité, toute qualité toile africain, toute qualité modaille had. C'est pas ça, personne ne passe à empêcher ça. So, pendant qu'il nous parler, pendant qu'il nous badier, pendant qu'il nous healer, c'est temps ça a passé. Pas ça mener vivre, comme on dit, seulement c'est sur une exhibition et quoi aller pour tout. Merci, messieurs, dames.
Okay.
Bonsoir.
Merci beaucoup. Yeah. Final comments. Let's start with you, Mr. LaForce.
Okay, first of all, let me just say that it's a kind of breath of fresh air, as one of the callers said, that now we have a young executive director. I think that I wanted to, leave with some young person to take over that mantle and push it forward. Because we need our people. By the time people like myself I'm not there for too long again, and many of us would not be around, we'd want to know that our people, our youngsters, would take on that mantle to continue to promote St. Lucia's culture, and not purely what happened in the past. That is only something to give us a guide. But as we go along, cultural dynamic is changing all the time. So we need young people to rally behind the Folk Research Center, as well as all organizations and institutions that promote our culture, the CDF, etc. And for us to continue improving upon what we're doing, using what we know, and ensuring that we can promote what we have, and to make St. Lucia a better place.
Ms. Victor?
Mr. LaForce, thank you, and thank you for all of your guidance to date. Tim, for me as a young person, I will do what I have to do to ensure that that the richness of our Creole culture is not just celebrated throughout the month of October, but throughout the year, and it becomes something that is already very innate to us, but it becomes part of our not just second but immediate nature, and that way will probably that the stigma that is attached to the language is gone, hopefully 90% within the next 5 years. And I look forward to carrying this mantle even more forcefully, given I have the strength of youth on my side, and to really take everything that I've learned from everyone and from the experiences of Jeune Creole 2019 and going to 2020 wiser, stronger, and more informed.
Louise Victor and Hilary LaForce, thank you so much for being my guests on this evening's Newsmaker Live. And to you, as always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for contributing via your calls. If it's Wednesday, it's Newsmaker Live. Time now for the clip that peaked.
People, come on everyone, take up some sail for the Creole race tomorrow. Don't forget that. Come and see. Meet Saturday and all for life when it's at home. Tomorrow the funeral of number 4, followed by number 3. And here comes Jay Joseph. No! People in front. No! Tickety. Oh! The horse is full. Nobody will. You'll be knowing that. Don't forget, come tomorrow. I'll be the commentator.
Once again, as a broadcast, please join me on Newspin tomorrow afternoon between 12:30 and 2 o'clock on Real FM 91.3 and 91.5, and that's between 12:30 and 2. My name is Timothy Paul. Good night, and see you next time.